in the midst of a raging wildfire that threatened to consume everything in its path. A young family found themselves stranded, helpless, and alone, with the flames inching closer and no escape in sight. They feared the worst, but then, a stranger appeared, calm, collected, and utterly unfazed by the chaos around him. He offered them a ride to safety. Little did they know, this man was none other than Keanu Reeves, the actor who had long kept his good deeds in the shadows. What started as a simple act of kindness would soon spiral into an unimaginable journey of recovery, generosity, and the strength of the human spirit. In the blink of an eye, everything changed for Ben and Emma. What began as a normal day quickly turned into a nightmare as the wildfires swept through the outskirts of their neighborhood, devouring everything in its path. The air was thick with smoke, and the heat was unbearable. Desperately trying to evacuate with their two young children, they piled into their old car, hoping to escape the growing inferno. But just a few miles from safety, disaster struck. The engine stalled. Ben tried frantically to restart the car, but it was no use. Panic set in as the smoke thickened, and the flames crept closer. Cars zoomed by, ignoring their cries for help. The world seemed to be closing in on them, and fear gripped their hearts. And just when it seemed like there was no hope left, a beat-up pickup truck appeared from the haze. Behind the wheel was a man who seemed completely unshaken by the chaos surrounding them. His voice was calm and steady as he rolled down the window and asked, "Need any help?" Ben, his mind racing, could hardly believe his ears. Without hesitation, the man waved them over and offered them a ride to safety. As they piled into the truck, Emma held her children close, grateful for this unexpected lifeline. The man's quiet reassurance soothed their nerves as they drove away from the danger, the sounds of the fire slowly fading into the distance. An hour later, they arrived at a nearby evacuation center, and the stranger helped them unload their belongings. Without making a fuss, he made sure they were settled and comfortable before slipping away into the crowd. Ben and Emma wanted to thank him, to ask his name, but by the time they turned around, he was gone, leaving them to wonder who he really was. Little did they know, the man who had saved them was none other than Keanu Reeves, the actor known for his kindness, yet always choosing to stay out of the limelight. As the days passed, the weight of the tragedy became more apparent. Their home was gone, reduced to ashes. Their car was beyond repair, and with no money left, the future seemed bleak. Emma tried to stay strong for the children, but the uncertainty was overwhelming. Ben, determined to find a way forward, set out to see if anything could be salvaged from the wreckage of their home. When he returned, his face told the whole story. Their life, as they knew it, was gone. They had nothing left. Emma held him, both of them unable to find the words to express their despair. But what happened next would change everything. Before I share this incredible story of hope and resilience, I want to connect with you, my amazing viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever experienced a moment when kindness from a stranger turned your life around, hit that like button, because what's about to happen next might just restore your faith in humanity. The very next day, the man who had helped them appeared again. This time, he introduced himself. "I'm Keanu." The name was almost too much to process. Keanu Reeves, the actor? Emma and Ben couldn't believe it. He smiled softly and explained that after dropping them off, he couldn't stop thinking about their situation. "I knew you'd have a hard time rebuilding your life," Keanu said quietly, "and if there's anything I can do, I want to help." At first, Ben and Emma hesitated. They didn't want to burden him, even knowing how much help they needed. But Keanu's sincerity was undeniable. He didn't want anything in return. He just wanted to make their lives easier. And so, after much conversation, Keanu arranged for them to meet with a local charity that could help. The very next day, they were offered temporary housing, a small house in a quiet suburb, large enough for the kids to play and breathe again. Keanu paid the rent for the next 6 months out of his own pocket. But that wasn't all. He arranged for a mechanic to fix their car, and soon enough, they were able to drive again. When they moved into their new home, Ben and Emma could hardly believe their eyes. The kids ran through the rooms, laughing as if they hadn't been through a traumatic experience just days before. For the first time in what felt like forever, the family was starting to heal, and it was all thanks to Keanu, whose quiet generosity was nothing short of a miracle. This is just the beginning of their journey. The power of community, kindness, and perseverance will soon show them that even the darkest times can lead to a brighter future. The best is yet to come. Keanu's help didn't stop with just a place to live. As days turned into weeks, he remained a quiet but steady presence in Ben and Emma's lives. It was during a simple dinner at their new home, a cozy little house on the outskirts of the city, that Keanu returned with another surprise. He had been thinking about them, he said, and wanted to ensure they had the stability they needed to start anew. Without fanfare, he told Ben he had arranged a job interview for him at one of the top construction companies in town. "I know it's not easy starting over," Keanu said, his voice calm, yet filled with empathy. "But I believe in you." Ben couldn't find the words at first. It wasn't just the job offer that had stunned him. It was the kindness, the unspoken understanding that Keanu had recognized the weight they carried, the heaviness of not knowing how to rebuild, how to even begin again. He had watched Ben struggle to keep the family afloat, trying to find any means of survival while navigating the overwhelming emotions of loss. The thought that a stranger, even someone as famous as Keanu, would care enough to help him get back on his feet was nothing short of a miracle. Keanu didn't just stop at securing a job for Ben. He became a mentor. They spent hours together, talking not just about work but about life. Keanu listened as Ben spoke about his fears, about being unable to provide for his family, about the guilt that gnawed at him for not being able to save their home. And each time, Keanu would reassure him, "You're doing more than you think, just by being here for them. You've already done something incredible." The day Ben started his new job was a turning point. He woke up early, the weight of the past still heavy, but for the first time in weeks, there was a glimmer of hope. As he drove to his new job site, he couldn't help but think about the generosity that had come into their lives from a stranger. When he arrived at the construction site, he was greeted by the owner of the company, who not only offered him a position but told him that he had heard about Ben's story from Keanu and was impressed by his resilience. "We're lucky to have someone like you," the owner said with a smile. It wasn't just the opportunity to work again that filled Ben with hope, but the recognition of his strength, something he had almost forgotten about in the midst of the devastation. Meanwhile, Emma was slowly finding her own path. She began volunteering at a local shelter for fire victims, offering emotional support to others who had lost everything. It was here that Emma's true strength began to shine. She had always been the glue that held their family together. But now, she was beginning to heal by helping others. Keanu kept in touch, regularly checking on her progress and offering advice when she needed it. "You're doing a beautiful thing," he told her one afternoon, after hearing about her work at the shelter. "Sometimes, the best way to heal is to help someone else." As weeks passed, the family began to rebuild, not just their home, but their sense of purpose. Keanu's support never wavered. He was there when Ben's first paycheck came through, offering a word of congratulations. And when Emma decided to turn her volunteer work into a full-time role at the shelter, Keanu helped her connect with the right people to make that dream a reality. With each new milestone, Ben and Emma could feel their strength growing. The wounds of their past were healing, not just through material help, but through the kindness and generosity of a stranger who had turned into something much more: a friend, a mentor, and a guiding light in their darkest times. In those quiet moments, when the family sat together, sharing dinner and laughter, they realized something incredible. Keanu had given them more than just a second chance at life. He had given them back their faith in humanity. It wasn't just the material support that mattered, though it had been life-changing. It was the emotional support, the reassurance that they weren't alone, that they were seen, that their pain mattered. Keanu had shown them that even in the most desperate of times, there could still be kindness, that a simple act of compassion could change the course of someone's life. And for Ben and Emma, that truth would carry them forward for the rest of their lives. As the days turned into weeks, Ben and Emma began to settle into their new life. But the weight of the past still hung heavy on their shoulders. Their new house was a small but comforting place, a safe haven compared to the devastation they had experienced. Yet it never quite felt like home. The uncertainty of their future lingered. And while they had each other, there was still so much to rebuild, emotionally, financially, and spiritually. Then, one morning, as the sun began to rise and light filled the room, there was a knock at the door. Ben opened it, surprised to see Keanu standing there with a warm smile. "I know things have been tough, but I've been thinking about you guys," Keanu said simply. He didn't need to say much more. His presence was a quiet reassurance, a reminder that they weren't alone in this. He handed Ben an envelope, which he took with a puzzled expression. Keanu simply said, "This is for you." Inside the envelope was a check, a generous amount that would cover their rent for an entire year. Ben's hands shook as he read the note attached. "I know starting over takes time. Use this to help give your family the stability you deserve." Keanu's words were not just financial support. They were a lifeline, a symbol that someone believed in their ability to overcome the struggles they were facing. The tears that welled in Ben's eyes weren't just from the surprise, but from the immense relief that flooded over him. He never thought they would receive such an act of kindness. In that moment, the years of hardship and uncertainty seemed to fade just a little bit. Emma, who had been sitting in the living room with their children, looked up to see Ben standing in the doorway, his face a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. When she saw the check, her heart swelled with emotion. "Keanu, you've already done so much for us," she said, voice breaking. "We don't know how to thank you enough." But Keanu simply shook his head, a soft smile on his face. "You don't have to thank me," he replied. "It's not about that. It's about making sure you and your family can get back on your feet. You've been through enough." The next few days were a blur of activity. With Keanu's help, Ben was able to get the car fixed, the one that had broken down in the middle of their escape from the fire. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was a symbol of their independence, of their ability to move forward again. Keanu didn't just make the repairs happen. He arranged for the mechanic to give Ben a special discount, knowing that every penny counted for a family who had lost everything. And as if that wasn't enough, Keanu helped Ben get a temporary loan to cover the costs of replacing some of the belongings they had lost in the fire. But perhaps the most impactful part of Keanu's support was not the material help. It was the emotional support. Keanu would call Ben every few days, checking in not just on their progress, but on how they were feeling. He wanted to know how Emma was doing with her volunteer work, how the kids were adjusting to their new life, and how Ben was handling everything. "It's not just about surviving," Keanu once told him. "It's about living again, finding joy in the small things." Slowly but surely, Ben and Emma began to heal. The weight of the past began to lift as they found a sense of stability that they had never imagined would be possible. But it wasn't just the material things that had changed, it was their outlook on life. They had gone from feeling helpless to feeling empowered. And much of that transformation was thanks to Keanu's unwavering support. With each passing day, the family grew stronger, not just physically, but emotionally. Emma's work at the shelter continued to inspire her, and she found herself drawn to helping others who had experienced similar losses. The more she gave, the more she realized how far she had come. In giving, she was healing herself, rediscovering a sense of purpose that had once been lost. Meanwhile, Ben thrived in his new job. The confidence that Keanu had instilled in him, the belief that he was capable of something greater than just surviving, gave him the strength to work harder than he ever had before. He began to take on more responsibilities at the construction site, impressing his boss with his dedication and work ethic. It wasn't long before Ben was promoted, and the extra income gave the family even more hope for the future. Keanu continued to check in on them, but his presence was becoming more subtle. He had given them the tools they needed to rebuild their lives. But now, it was up to Ben and Emma to do the rest. And they were determined to do just that. They had come too far to go back. With every passing day, the simple acts of kindness that Keanu had shown continued to reverberate through Ben and Emma's lives. But it wasn't just the financial help that made the difference. It was the moments in between, the quiet, unspoken gestures that truly transformed their outlook on life. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow across their new home, Emma sat with their children in the backyard. The kids, for the first time since the fire, were laughing and playing in the garden. The sound of their joy filled Emma's heart, and for the first time, she felt a true sense of peace. As she watched them, her thoughts drifted back to the dark days at the evacuation center, when the future had seemed so uncertain. Now, sitting here, surrounded by her children's laughter, she realized how far they had come, and it was all thanks to Keanu. Ben had been working late that evening, but when he came home, he found Emma sitting on the porch, gazing at the stars. "I was just thinking about how lucky we are," she said softly, looking up at him. Ben joined her, sitting beside her in silence for a moment. He knew exactly what she meant. Life had been hard, but they had fought through it together. And now, they had a new beginning. It was during moments like these, when the world seemed still and calm, that Ben and Emma could truly appreciate the depth of Keanu's impact. It wasn't just the practical help that had changed their lives, but the emotional support, the constant reminder that they weren't alone. It was Keanu's unwavering belief in their ability to rise from the ashes that had sparked a change in them. For the first time in a long time, they both felt capable of moving forward, capable of building a future. One afternoon, Keanu stopped by their home unannounced. He had a small package with him, wrapped in simple brown paper. "I saw this and thought of you," he said, handing it to Emma. Inside the package was a book, a collection of stories about resilience and rebuilding. Keanu smiled, his eyes soft with understanding. "I thought this might inspire you, help you see the strength in yourself that I see every day." Emma opened the book and smiled through her tears. It wasn't just a book. It was a gift of encouragement, a reminder that they were not defined by the tragedy they had faced. She hugged Keanu, her heart full of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "You've done more for us than you'll ever know." The following week, Ben and Emma invited Keanu over for dinner. It was a small, humble gathering, just the three of them sitting around their kitchen table, sharing a meal together. As they ate, they talked about everything and nothing. They laughed, they shared stories, and they even found themselves discussing their hopes for the future. Keanu, who had always been reserved, opened up a little more that evening. He spoke about the things he valued most in life, the quiet moments, the connection between people, the beauty of helping others without expecting anything in return. "I've learned that sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can have the biggest impact," he said quietly, looking around at them. "And you too. You've shown me what true strength looks like." That evening, Ben and Emma realized something they hadn't fully understood before. Keanu's help had been more than just charity. It had been a catalyst for their transformation. It had ignited a spark of hope, one that they had thought was extinguished forever. But now, it was burning brightly within them. They had the courage to face their future, the strength to rebuild, and the knowledge that they were not alone. As the weeks turned into months, Ben and Emma continued to rebuild their lives. But something had shifted within them. They were no longer just survivors of a tragedy. They had become a family determined to thrive. Keanu's influence had sparked something in them that could not be extinguished, a newfound belief in their own resilience and in the power of kindness to change the world. In those quiet moments, when Ben and Emma looked at each other, they knew that they were ready for whatever came next. They had each other, and they had the strength that came from having experienced and overcome so much. And most importantly, they had Keanu, a reminder that sometimes the greatest change comes not from grand gestures, but from simple acts of love and care. As the months passed, Ben and Emma's lives slowly began to stabilize. Their new house had become more than just a roof over their heads. It had become a symbol of their resilience, their journey from devastation to hope. But despite the progress they had made, there were still moments when the weight of everything they had lost felt too heavy to bear. One such moment came when Ben returned home from a long day at work. His hands were covered in dirt, his face weary, but there was a sense of accomplishment in his eyes. He walked through the door, and for a split second, everything felt normal again. He saw Emma in the kitchen, the kids playing in the living room, and in that instant, he realized just how much they had healed. But as he looked around at the little things they had slowly rebuilt, the worn furniture, the small decorations on the walls, it hit him. They had lost so much, and yet here they were, starting over, building a new life from the ground up. Emma noticed the distant look on Ben's face and walked over to him. She placed a hand on his shoulder and asked gently, "Are you okay?" Ben hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to put his feelings into words. He had always been the strong one, the protector, but in this moment, he felt vulnerable, as though the weight of their journey was catching up with him. "I'm just thinking about how much we've been through," he said quietly. "It feels like a lifetime ago that we were running from that fire, and yet, some days, still feels like it's right there, just behind us." Emma nodded, understanding completely. She, too, had her moments of doubt, moments when the emotional scars from that night resurfaced. Uninvited, but they had made it through, together, and that was something worth celebrating. "We've come so far, Ben," she said softly, her voice filled with conviction. "Look at us now. We're here. We're alive. And we're stronger than we were before." Ben smiled, the weight on his chest lifting just a little. He kissed her forehead gently, grateful for her unwavering support. But as they stood there, holding each other, they both knew that their healing wasn't just about rebuilding their home. It was about rebuilding themselves, learning to trust again, to find peace amidst the chaos. And at the heart of their recovery was Keanu, the man whose kindness had set everything in motion. In the weeks that followed, Ben and Emma became more involved in their community. They had begun to heal not only their own wounds but the wounds of others who had been affected by the fires. Emma, with her natural empathy, had become a volunteer at a local shelter, offering a listening ear to other families who had lost everything. Ben, too, found himself reaching out, helping others with the skills he had honed over the years. They knew that they could never truly repay Keanu for what he had done for them, but they could honor his kindness by paying it forward. And so, they did. One evening, as Ben and Emma sat on their porch, reflecting on everything that had transpired, Keanu stopped by for a visit. He had been quiet lately, allowing them the space to heal on their own. But he never strayed too far. His presence was always a comforting reminder that they were never truly alone. Sometimes, the hardest part of rebuilding isn't the physical work, Keanu said, his voice soft as he sat down beside them. It's the emotional work, the healing of the heart. Ben and Emma looked at each other, their hearts full of gratitude. They had come so far because of Keanu's generosity, not just in material ways, but in the way he had nurtured their spirits. He had reminded them that they were capable of so much more than they had ever believed. "You've helped us rebuild our lives in ways we didn't even know were possible," Emma said, her voice trembling slightly. "We owe you more than we could ever say." Keanu smiled gently, his eyes filled with understanding. "I didn't do it alone. You two did the hard part. You found the strength to keep going, even when it seemed impossible." Those words struck a chord deep within Ben and Emma. Keanu was right. The true strength had always been within them. He had merely helped them see it. And now, as they looked at each other, with the fire of hope and determination burning in their hearts, They knew that they could face whatever came next. Their journey wasn't just about survival. It was about rediscovery, about finding new strength in the face of adversity. They had learned that life wasn't about avoiding the storms, but about how you stood in the rain and kept moving forward. And for the first time in a long time, Ben and Emma knew that the future was theirs to create. As the months passed, Ben and Emma found themselves slowly emerging from the darkness of the past, stepping into a future that once seemed impossible. The house they had built, brick by brick, both physically and emotionally, had become a symbol of their strength. They had not only rebuilt their home but had reconnected with the very essence of who they were. A family bound together by love, resilience, and the unspoken bond of shared experience. The nights were still quiet, sometimes too quiet, as they lay in bed reflecting on how far they had come. But now, there was peace in that silence. The trauma that once kept them awake at night no longer haunted their every thought. They had learned to embrace the stillness, to find comfort in the simple things, the sound of their children's laughter echoing through the house, the warmth of each other's presence, and the quiet moments of reflection that now filled them with gratitude rather than fear. One evening, after a long day of work, Ben sat on the porch, watching the sunset behind the mountains. He marveled at the beauty of the world around him, something he had taken for granted before the fire. Emma joined him, her hand finding his as they sat in companionable silence. Together, they watched the sky change colors, feeling the weight of the past lift just a little more with each passing day. In that moment, Ben turned to Emma, his eyes full of quiet emotion. "I think we're going to be okay," he said, his voice steady but soft. Emma squeezed his hand in response, a tear slipping down her cheek. She nodded, her heart swelling with pride. They had made it, not just through the fire, but through everything that had come after it. And in the distance, they could see the tiny flicker of light that marked their new beginning. A light that had been reignited by the kindness of one man. A man who had shown them that even in the darkest times, there was always hope. Keanu's final act of kindness had been the most profound. It wasn't just the material support or the guidance he had offered them. It was the simple truth he had imparted that the strength to rebuild, to heal, had always been within them. He had given them the tools to believe in themselves again, to recognize their own power to shape their future. As Ben and Emma reflected on their journey, they realized that their story wasn't just about loss and recovery. It was about the human spirit's incredible ability to rise above adversity. It was about how kindness, both given and received, could transform lives in ways they never thought possible. They had faced a tragedy that had shattered their world, but in doing so, they had discovered a deeper connection to each other, to their community, and to the world around them. They had found a way to not only survive but to thrive. And as they looked out at the horizon, hand in hand, they knew that the road ahead, while still uncertain, was one they could walk with courage and hope. And so, as they sat together on the porch, watching the last rays of the sun dip below the horizon, Ben and Emma finally understood the most important lesson of all, that no matter how much darkness you face, there is always the promise of a new day, a new beginning, and that with love, resilience, and a little help from unexpected places, even the most broken things can be restored.